Hello my friends, welcome back to the channel. It is I, Gen Insight, here with a wonderful video for you. I hope you find it wonderful. This idea was given to me by someone in one of my TikTok comment sections when they asked if I could go over my favorite authors in the public domain. And like any good content creator, I took that idea as my own and have presented it now in front of you for your approval. Please love me. So, first and foremost, we're going to go over what public domain means, and then I'll go over some of my favorite authors that are in the public domain. And, you know, as always, I'll throw it open to you guys in the comments for who your favorite public domain author is. But first, let's talk about what even this means. So, works that are in the public domain typically means that the copyright on whatever work of literature, and it can be for any creative work really, like a movie, song, literature, all that sort of stuff, but it means that the copyright for that work of art has expired. Now this can happen any number of ways. Either it's been revoked for some reason, the author willingly gave it up, so they just kind of like made it like free market, open source to the world, or here in the United States, typically speaking, 70 years have passed since the death of the author. Not the essay death of the author, but the literal death of the author. And when something is in the public domain, that means you don't have to pay rights for it. This is why Shakespeare is performed so much. In addition to him being the best English language poet of all time and playwright of all time, all of his work is in the public domain, so you don't need to pay any rights to put on a production of, say, Hamlet or Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet. Where this is a little more interesting, though, is when we get into the world of fiction, poetry, basically books. Any of the works of some of the authors that I'm going to mention here today, no one owns the copyright to them, so people can just print them up and sell them without having to pay any sort of royalty to the publishing house, to the author, what have you. And with that in mind, let's go through some of my favorites, and then I'll mention some places that you can find their works for free online at the end of this video, so stick around. So the first author that sprung to mind when this idea for this video totally came to me and wasn't at all taken from someone in my comment section was Charles Dickens. Now, Charles Dickens has a bit of a complicated relationship with a lot of people who were forced to read his works in high school, especially American high school. But I think he's a great author. I know, controversial opinion. Charles Dickens, a great author, and he was the first person I thought of. So what makes Charles Dickens so great, in my opinion? The man had such a depth of understanding, not only of how to create a character and humanity, like you care for his characters. Like in particular, my favorite work of his is A Tale of Two Cities, and just basically everyone in that, you want them to make it through the Terror and the French Revolution unharmed because you care so deeply for them, because he does such a great job of giving them characterization. Another thing that he does really well is that he will imbue a character with a particular attribute, and that becomes their whole, like, persona. A great example of this is in A Tale of Two Cities. There's a character who is called Vengeance, who just becomes like Madame Defarge's sort of like enforcer, and she just embodies what vengeance means, the spirit of vengeance of the French Revolution. She is the bloodthirsty part of that like mob mentality, the Robespierres of the world. In addition to A Tale of Two Cities, A Christmas Carol. It's a short read, but is one of the things that is credited with sort of creating the modern conception of Christmas Day and the way that we celebrate it now. It and the rise of consumerism is directly responsible with Christmas being the big deal that it is, to the point where it is no longer even a religious holiday. A Christmas Carol doesn't even really mention the Christian sort of like mythology around Christmas Day. It becomes more about fellow feeling and goodwill towards your fellow man. And the character of Ebenezer Scrooge, I would say, is one of the greatest characters in all of literature. All right, next up, we're not at all switching things up because we're staying right there in England, but we're going a little further back. It's going to be William Shakespeare. Now, Shakespeare is, like I said, the greatest English language poet of all time, the greatest English language playwright of all time, and arguably the greatest playwright of all time. And that's for good reason. The man pumped out a lot of plays, and pretty much all of them are incredible. Even Shakespeare's B-sides, things like Timon of Athens or Titus Andronicus, are still so compelling, and there's so much in them, and there's so much that can be plumbed from those depths, that honestly, like, the fact that you can read him for free at any time is incredible, and the fact that at any given point in any state in the Union and any country in the world, you can probably find a production of a Shakespeare play within driving or train or whatever distance of you, that's incredible, because there's so much in that language, there's so much in those stories, and yeah, I don't have to tell you who Shakespeare is, he's the legend. Alright, so this next author carries with him a little bit of a caveat here. So the next person that I would highly recommend that is in the public domain is Fyodor Dostoevsky, author of, among other things, Crime and Punishment, The Brothers Karamazov, Notes from Underground, basically like just hit after hit after hit. The thing to keep in mind with him though is, while the original text in Russian is definitely in the public domain, translation is where things get a little tricky, because the translators, because so much art goes into translation, it's not just like copy into Google Translate, paste, we're done, you know? So much actual art and craft goes into translation that the translators actually own the copyright on the translations that they make. So, finding a translation of Fyodor Dostoevsky's work in the public domain might require a little bit of work, but there are places you can look. Like I said, I will give you at the end. Just know that, hey, sometimes you might be helping out a living artist by purchasing the work, and if you really can't or don't want to pay for it, there are options as well. Okay, so this one will be a little weird, it'll be a little different from the rest of this list, but I'm going to also recommend that there are quite a few of the founding political documents of the world political thought, if you will, that are in the public domain that bear being read. For example, if you are in the United States and you have an interest in how the government was set up and how the framers of the Constitution felt it should work, the Federalist Papers are in the public domain, of course written by John Jay, who wrote 5, James Madison, who would go on to become president, wrote 29, and Alexander Hamilton wrote the other 51! I think I'm so fucking funny. In addition to that, some of the founding documents of, say, socialist and communist thought, such as the Communist Manifesto and Marx's Capital, those are also free to read anywhere. Capital is a very dense, very dry read, and the Communist Manifesto is a good idea for a starting, but Marx himself said, hey, like, this was written for a very specific point in time in a very specific place. It's not exactly a blueprint for a Marxist revolution, but hey, if it gets the kids reading the socialism, I'm all for it. I'ma have it. And then finally, making things a little weirder, a little more different again, I'm also going to talk about a little bit of music that is in the public domain. In particular, most of what we know to be classical music is in the public domain. So the works of Ludwig van Beethoven, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, all of that sort of stuff is free to find somewhere. You don't have to pay for that music to be able to listen to and enjoy it. But much like the translation, let's say, of authors not writing in English, the performances of this music may be copyrighted. So music gets a little wonky with like who owns the song rights, who owns the recording rights or the master rights. That's why Taylor Swift is re-recording all of her old albums so that she can retain the master rights to them while she has always held the songwriting credit. But it's worth mentioning that that music is in the public domain, and if you are someone who is musically inclined, let's say, maybe not even like a classical musician, let's say you're a producer, hip-hop producer who wants to flip some stuff into something pretty cool, you can go to all of the Ludwig van that you want, and as long as you personally are playing the music and not using the recording of someone else, you don't have to pay any rights on any of that, you don't have to clear any of those samples, you can just use them to your heart's content. You should do it. It's a good way to break the monotony that has become the, let's say, in particular, the trap music scene. It's kind of just the same 808s and hi-hats over and over again. a little bit of Ludwig van in there, a little bit of Wolfgang Amadeus would really spice things up. Alright, and there are some of my favorite authors and, I guess, musicians that are in the public domain. Now at the top I also promised there are places where you can find these works either free or super on the cheap, and yeah, that's important because not everyone has the money to throw at the classics, to throw at all of this stuff to try and build up a library, or at least just like a familiarity with these classic works in a way that they can exist in the literature, intellectual zeitgeist and climate. So one of the places that I've gone to for years that I think is great is projectgutenberg.com. It's a website that's like community driven, community run, and as things come into the public domain, they are added into it. Sometimes the interface is a little wonky. The formatting, if you download the works, can be a little, you know, but it's a wealth of knowledge, which is really, really good. If you are more of the audiobook persuasion, there is a service called LibriVox, which the commenter who originally gave me this idea also mentioned. So this person, what's your name? What's your name? Bojack Horseman. What an amazing name. Bojack Horseman, you get a lot of credit for this video. I really appreciate it. But LibriVox is a free service there you can use to get audiobooks. And all of those audiobooks are in the public domain, which is also super like impressive because the people who are narrating these audiobooks are doing it for nothing. They're doing it out of the kindness of their hearts. They're doing it because they love literature and they want to share it with the rest of the world. So they have my whole heart, as does Bojack Horseman. So there you have it, my friends. A quick breakdown of what public domain means, some of my favorite artists within the public domain, and then some places you can check out to get some good literature on the free. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here. Subscribe if you haven't done so. Follow me on all of the socials if you haven't done so. The link will be in the bio. Just hit that link tree there. And once again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here with me. I really, truly appreciate it. You people keep me going. And yeah, I'll catch you next time. Love you.